Hello, and welcome to Doom Antidote. Today we will be breaking down the best books of 2022, with books spanning from Greek antiquity to 2022. It's going to be very, 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 very... Hello everybody, is everyone alright? My name is Ben and welcome to Doom Antidote, and today I'm going to be going through my best books that I read in 2022. So this video is going to be slightly chaotic in that I've tried to whittle it down to 10 and that didn't work. I tried to whittle it down to 12 and that didn't work. So instead I'm just going to throw a bunch of books at you and see what lands. So yes, in terms of the whole year, with reading stuff, I think I've read, according to Storygraph, I've read about 68 books, I think, which is less than last year. However, within that, that does include some big hitters. I've managed to tick off some big hitters in terms of classic books. And in terms of classic books and modern books, I focused a lot more this year on backlist and classic books. There's very, very few current releases that I read. So my current releases... I didn't read very many. So a lot of these are classic books or backlist books. So I've got my coffee, I've got my hideous see-through jumper, I've got my sort of 2016 booktube fairy lights. So let's have a go, shall we? So this first book, I have to be careful because when I open this book, I tend to just get lost, and I will just look at it for over an hour. And that is If Not Winter by Sappho! Fragments of Sappho! Oh man, I love this book. I really love this book so much. Cloth dripping. Do I still yearn for my virginity? Youth. Oh, I love this. I love this so much. So this is, Sappho as a person and a woman is just fascinating, isn't she? She's this very, very influential poet from antiquity, and the only thing that is left is fragments. These little things. So I think there's only one or two maybe full poems that we have from Sappho, but the rest are just sort of tiny little bits. But she was like really, really influential, and Plato loved her and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, so why do I love it so much? I love the mystery of it. The way that Carson has translated it and kind of laid it out is so... it's just so kind of pleasing to me. I mean, it really does emphasise the fragments of it all and the mystery of it, and kind of she doesn't attempt to kind of join the dots with anything. She really does just present what is there. That might so because of that, your enjoyment of this, it really is kind of Marmitey. You either really love it or you kind of don't get anything out of it at all. But I really could, now that I've opened it, I really could. Eros shook my mind like a mountain wind falling on oak trees. I really could just spend an hour with this quite happily. And I probably will after I finish this, because I adore it a lot. I don't know, don't ask me why. Why? Well, don't ask me. I love it a lot. Okay, so we're skipping a few thousand years. The next book, from little bits to massive tome. So this year, right back in January, I finished... I finished War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. So this is a bit kind of... because I read the majority of this in the latter half of 2021, but I finished it in January of this year. War and Flipping Peace. Oh, man. I mean, this is kind of one of those books, isn't it? It's a massive one. It's kind of... in terms of classic literature, it's big on the checklist. What is it actually about? Well, it's about War and Peace. It's about history, really. It's about how cumulatively... It's not just the key figures from history who shape history. It's everyone. It's the whole of humanity. And in terms of the Napoleonic Wars, that is very true as well. It's not just Napoleon and whoever it was who sort of shaped the course of history. It was the everyday people. I say the everyday people because this book mainly focuses on the aristocracy. But his point still kind of stands in that, everyone shapes history, and everything has a cumulative effect. A realist work of fiction, but the plot arcs and the big kind of questions about life and death. I mean, it's what you expect from Russian literature, 19th century Russian literature, which talks about the big questions about life and death and love and all the rest of it. There are certain key characters who have amazing kind of rises and falls. It's very, very enjoyable ride. This translation is a little bit kind of I could take it or leave it, just because of the French to English translation footnotes, which is just kind of a bit unnecessary in terms of, as far as I'm concerned. But in terms of the novel itself, it is just it's a massive undertaking, but it is definitely worth it. The epilogue is strange, kind of essay thing going on with Tolstoy. But yes, definitely worth your time. If you want to tackle it, then do. Okay, next. So from big to very, very small again. Another classic book that I really enjoyed this year was A Room with a View by E.M. Forster. Ooh, this is fabulous, isn't it? So, A Room with a View, I love the Merchant Ivory film, and I've watched that many, many times. But I'd never read the book, and so this year I was like, ooh, and the book is just gorgeous, isn't it? It's really, really gorgeous. And it's just an example, the film is an example of an adaptation done really, really well. The things that the film changes make perfect sense to me, but the difference is, it's still, this book is just like, ooh. So really, what this book is about, it's about Apollonian and Dionysian sensibilities, sort of. So it's about this young girl who's kind of caught in this nexus of lots of different clashes of culture and various different things. So she's caught between the English kind of culture and Italian culture when they go to visit Florence. She's caught between the clash between men and women. She's caught between upper class and working class. She's caught between generational type things. She's just all these kind of different expectations and sort of different experiences leave her in a bit of a muddle.
Forgive me, my dear, but it seems to me that you're in a muddle.
Yeah, it's about her being in a bit of a muddle, basically. But it's a gorgeous little romance story. It's a really sort of fabulous comment on English sensibilities and mores, and it's just I just loved it a lot. I really, really loved it a lot. Okay, so next up we have something very, very different. So this year I read for the first time 1984 by George Orwell. I've said this before many times, but I love this cover exceedingly. I think this is a fabulous cover. So arguably this is kind of like one of the fathers of modern dystopic novels, and it's bleak. It's very, very bleak, but it's very, very fascinating. What I found really fascinating out of it was its politics, which and its commentary on politics, because it's kind of unclear sort of which side. Which kind of despotic side it's kind of commenting on, and it's really what it's commenting on is just power corrupting. Absolutely, it's not about fascism, it's not about communism, taken to the extreme. It's about power, and there's elements of kind of both things in this world, which I thought was fascinating. So not only do you have the kind of very jingoistic, identity-based stuff of fascism, but you also have the complete stripping away of individualism, complete stripping away of language and thought, which is kind of like the fear of extreme communism as well. So it's very, very interesting, very, very bleak. The ending is just like, but just fascinating. I'm fascinated. It's great to have read it because you do. This is kind of one of those books, isn't it, where you do kind of it's been kind of copied and parodied and referenced so much in popular culture.
You're an adulterer! I need to you had... Excuse me!
And sort of to go to the source is very... It's just very good. And it's a very, very good read. It's very, very bleak, but it's fascinating, I think. So, yes. So the next two books, they are not linked at all. They are very, very different, but I do see them as kind of opposite sides of a similar kind of coin. So the first one is One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich. Oh my word, this is fabulous. This is really, really fabulous. I would really, really urge anyone to read this. This is very, very short. It's a day in the life of this guy who is in a Russian labor camp. And it is just, I mean, going in, what I thought it was going to be was this kind of really hard-hitting, really bleak, very kind of tough to read story. I was like preparing myself. But what it actually becomes is something much more sort of life-affirming and much more kind of hopeful in a sort of weird way. So it's about this guy who is in this forced labour camp, sort of trying to survive from minute to minute, but he is on the receiving end of a series of good fortune, which by the end kind of makes him realise, oh, today has been a really, really good day in this dire circumstance, in this absolutely horrific circumstance. And it's just, as a read, I was so surprised by it. I was so sort of like caught off guard by it, in just how kind of like amazing it was and how well it was sort of crafted and stuff. I was just like, oh, this is fabulous, really, really fabulous. So I would very much recommend it. It's very, very short. I mean, you are dealing with sort of brutal subject matter, but it's just, there's a real sort of hope in it, which I was very, very appreciative of. So I say the next book is sort of the opposite side of a similar coin. Oh man. I hated this book a lot, but I loved it. So I read Stoner by John Williams. So whereas that book is the mundane and the extraordinary, this is the extraordinary in the mundane. And I hated this book because it's just very, the blows it lands in its cold hard truths is very kind of like, It's basically the story of a life, of a mundane life, of an unsuccessful life, and of a life of a man who hasn't really achieved anything that he wants to achieve. However, he has achieved something because he's lived this life of experience and stuff, and it's just like, So it is about this man Stoner, who he manages to tick off the things that you're meant to tick off in terms of getting an education, getting a wife, getting a house, having a family. But at what cost? Yeah, but at the cost of his kind of overall happiness and, sense of fulfillment and dreams and all that kind of stuff. And it's interesting kind of looking at various people on YouTube talking about it, particularly people in their 20s talking about this book, because people in their 20s were really like, oh, this is amazing. And now that I am, in my mid to late 30s, it kind of hit different, this book. I'm 36, I'm a struggling actor still, and I have nothing to complain about. I'm not complaining at all. I'm very, very fortunate in my life, and very happy in my life. But it is still kind of, you sort of think, oh my goodness gracious, I'm a struggling actor. And, there are people that I knew at drama school who now have Emmys and Golden Globes and all that sort of stuff, and are very likely to be nominated for Oscars this year. And it's just like, hello! But why is it on the best books? It's just, the way that it's written is just gorgeous. It's just so kind of sad. Stoner is a tragic figure. He's kind of a bit annoying at times. You really, really sort of are rooting for him, and any kind of minute petty victory that he gets, you're just like, yes! But all in all, this is kind of just about a book about life, the very life of life, and the disappointments of life, and the regrets of life, and the petty kind of hardships of life. Even of the petty hardships of kind of lower middle class life. So but I do recommend it because it is. Whilst I hated it, it is definitely a magnificent piece of literature. So there we go. Speaking of magnificent works of literature, if you read Toni Morrison in a given year, then it's very likely that she'll turn up in your best books of the year. And that's the same with me. So I read Song of Solomon. Yeah, just fabulous. Absolutely fabulous. So I think this and Beloved are kind of her two kind of big ones. And this is just like... This is a book which really shouldn't work because it's so all over the place and so kind of like just goes into directions which are just so kind of like unexpected. But Morrison is just able, somehow, I don't know how she does it, but she's able to weave this kind of very bonkers story, which goes off into really sort of strange places, and able to sort of bring it all together at the end. Her language is just... Again, I don't know how she does it. She's able to be so specific in her language, whilst at the same time be so kind of expressive and sprawling. It's just absolutely kind of like, how do you do it, Toni Morrison? It really does stay with you. It really does stay with you, this book. I am still on my quest to sort of go through Morrison's bibliography. So, yes, I think next I have Tar Baby to read. But yeah, this is just absolutely fabulous. So, yeah. So next, I was sort of umming and ahhing whether to include this because it's not a book which I sort of overly enjoyed. Like I found it a bit of a slog to get through, but there's just no, for some reason I just can't, to leave it off this list would just feel a bit weird. So I am including it, and that is Midnight's Children by Salman Rushdie. It took me a good few months to read this. I think it was 4 in total to read this. So it's a magic realism novel. It's a novel which takes a massive look at the history of India in the 20th century. It's an epic story, and it's just so kind of... The way that it's written is so kind of masterful. I did find it a slog for a lot of it, but there's just no denying the sort of the majesty of this kind of writing and just how... What he managed to achieve with this novel is just... it's just immense, you know? It's a lot of events condensed into one novel. It's not a short novel. It's about 600 pages, just over. And yeah, I did find it a slog for a lot of it, but you can't deny how immense it is and how important a book it is in the 20th century and stuff. So, Midnight's Children, I've included it because it's just one of those books, you know. So I read this because I was wanting to get... tick off more Booker Prize winners. I was sort of interested in what sort of makes a Booker Prize winner, so I was reading a lot of them. And in doing so, the next 2 books, I don't actually have them with me because they were library books, but I read Disgrace. Oh my goodness gracious, Disgrace! This book is just so it's so horrible and so bleak and so kind of just like a gut punch. But it's so, like, powerful. Just the way, this is just, like, it's a book that stayed with me because it's, not just because of its horrible subject matter, but because the way that it's sort of crafted, it's a book which raises so many sort of ethical, moral questions about certain stuff. And as a protagonist, we have a protagonist who is kind of one of the most despicable protagonists that you will read, but what he goes through and what his family goes through, you just kind of just like, oh my goodness gracious. By the end, you're like, this guy needs a break. Because it is a book where things just get worse and worse and worse and worse. And of course, the pivotal scene in the middle is just absolutely terrifying, brutal, and flippin' heck. And it's a real masterpiece in toying with your sort of emotions and stuff, because this, as I say, this is a despicable character, and the first act, the first third, you're thinking this guy needs to kind of get his comeuppance, and then by the time you're sort of in 2/3 of it, you're just like, oh my god, this guy needs a break. So oh my goodness gracious. Yeah, I had to put it on this list. It's a no-brainer, really. Read Disgrace. Be warned, but read Disgrace because it is absolutely phenomenal. So there we go. Another phenomenal Booker Prize winner I read was The Sense of an Ending. The Sense of a Flipping Ending by Julian Barnes. This book is an example of a writer who is so in control. Similar to this. It's an example of a writer who is so in control of his craft. It's a very short novel, but it's a novel which kind of really kind of shows... it's a lesson in minding your own business, is A Sense of an Ending. And I read it, I think I read it it must have been like 2 or 3 sittings. I just sort of really like, what is going to happen? I really loved the ending so much. Because I was just like, what? Because I remember... Because I remember sort of trying to figure out kind of what the big plot twist would be. And I was convinced I had it at one point, but by the end, it's so kind of layered. The reveal of what actually is happening is so layered and so nuanced and so kind of sad that it did take me a minute to be like, okay, what has actually happened? And then when it clicked, I was like,
oh my word.
So yeah, mind your business, mind your own business. Is the lesson from that. Sense of an ending. Oh my goodness gracious. Read A Sense of an Ending. It's fabulous. So I don't know what number we're on, but we're now going to talk about 2 books from this year, I think. So another book that I read, which I don't have with me, is Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan. Oh. Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan. This is fabulous. So this was, I believe, shortlisted for the Booker Prize this year. It won the Orwell Prize for Political Fiction, which I think is very apt. So this is a book about, really it's about compassion. It's about doing the right thing in the face of sort of dire consequences. It's a really clever book in sort of layering this guy's backstory as he sort of works through this Christmas period. The decision that he makes, and then just kind of leaving it at the point where you're just like, oh no, what's gonna happen? And I think it's absolutely gorgeous. I think it's really kind of it's a way of doing historical fiction, which I think just really sort of gets it right, you know. And yeah, I would thoroughly recommend it. It's really, really fabulous. Very short again, but fabulous. And lastly, this is a bit kind of cheeky of me. I am going to include this, even though I haven't finished it yet. I'm only halfway through. But I am going to include this. After Sappho. So I'm only halfway through, but already I know it's going to be one of my favourite books of the year because it's so weird. I mean, this is another example of what I like to call little bits novels, which is something that's kind of becoming more and more of a theme in recent years in terms of literary fiction. Little bits novels which kind of are more sort of fragmentary or more vignette-y. So yeah, in terms of its style, I mean, Matthew Sharappa, he mentioned that it's sort of the way that he categorized it was almost like museum or art gallery sort of descriptions. Sort of little kind of descriptions of things, which added up presents this sort of massive web of women's lives from the sort of, I think, late 19th century through to the early 20th century. And it looks at the lives of all these kind of European women who are mostly, I believe, lesbian. They all have a connection to Sappho in some way. They all have a connection kind of in various ways to each other. And these are actors, writers, poets, architects. And it's just, reading it, I'm fascinated by it. Also, you do have the Sappho connection, which, you know, and I believe that she is using the Anne Carson translation when she references the Sappho stuff. So that's very interesting. But yeah, I am really loving it, and I couldn't. I wanted to include it because even though I'm halfway, I kind of wanted to sort of just include it because I am loving it, really, really loving it. So yes. So yeah, so there we go. So those are my. I don't know how many that was, but that's my favourite books of the year. So the other sort of big hitters, I mean, Mrs. Dalloway. I loved Mrs. Dalloway. What else did I read this year? Oh my gosh, I've forgotten. You know what, I've forgotten. It wasn't part of my pile, so I forgot it. But I have read, of course, Marcel flipping Proust! In Search of Lost Flipping Time! Yeah, I mean, this feels like an achievement. So yes, this is one of the best books that I've read this year, obviously. It is an infuriating read. It is a slog. It's very, very difficult at times. But the payoffs that you get as you go through it just make it worth it. It is about a character who is very, very stupid, insufferable, despicable, and does very, very questionable things throughout. But the way that it pays off and the things that it talks about in terms of pinpointing certain behaviours and psychology of certain people. It's just really, really fascinating and fabulous, and it does feel like an achievement to get to the end of it. Oh, hello! It's a ride. It's a real ride, and in terms of the style, I mean, there are plenty of boring bits, but the jigsawiness of it all, as I've sort of said, it's fascinating because you just get to certain bits and you're like, oh, blimey! Is it worth it? I would say yes, it is, but it is an effort. It is definitely an effort. So proceed with caution, and there's no shame in kind of starting with Swan's Way and going, nah, it's not for me. But I certainly enjoyed it, and I would recommend it. And there we are. So thank you so much for watching if you've been watching. What do I want to achieve next year? Well, I'm going to do a video on the modern classics that I want to read next year. And we shall see. Also, we recently, very, very just recently, reached 4,000 subscribers! 4,000 subscribers, which I'm really, really grateful for. Thank you so much for subscribing if you've been subscribing. And if you've just been watching, then I am also very, very grateful. If you like, if you comment, if you do anything, if you just watch 2 seconds of my videos just by clicking on it, then I'm very, very grateful. Booktube is a fabulous, fabulous thing to do. It's really, really fun. It's the community aspect is fabulous. It's meant that I have read books which I would never have read before. The people are awesome, and it's just a very, very fabulous thing to do, to make. So I'm really, really grateful. Next year, my booktubing may change a little bit. We'll see, depending on how my life goes. But yes, we shall see what happens. Happy New Year, and I shall see you very soon. Goodbye.